So it comes down to, in this US-China battle, Tesla, just like NVIDIA, is actually a chip on the table. Then investors are like, okay, as an AI play, when you think about physical AI, NVIDIA and Tesla, to me, are the best pure play physical AI plays. But it's proving it, and now look, just like if you look at Apple and Tesla, they're in the penalty box from an investor. If you think about even Mag 7, where on the other side, of course, you got Godfather of AI Jensen, you got Redmond and Nadella, you have Meta and Zuck. So there's a separation going on. Apple and Tesla is right here in that penalty box.
And none of this is dependent on trade deals, right? Because if you talk about NVIDIA, I know that Jensen Huang wants that, what he says is a $50 billion market open. Does Broadcom need that to happen as well?
I think there's still so much demand for adopting and building AI infrastructure around the world that there's a lot of room still for growth. So yes, Jensen would certainly like China to be opened up. I think he makes a good argument for why it's in the U.S. best interest to do that. But there's still a shortage of those chips, whether they're made by NVIDIA or whether they're co-designed by a company like Broadcom. So, it would be nice if we could get into that market as well. But look at all the sovereign investments going on around the world in AI infrastructure. And look also at the enterprise investments. Companies may not want to share their data publicly to an AI model that's in the cloud. They might want to build that capability in-house. So there's still a lot of demand out there for the chip guys. And I see not just Broadcom and NVIDIA, but a company like AMD that's just bringing to market some of their AI-capable chips to customers.
Let's play this game. What is going to be the best performing mega cap name over the next 6 months? Microsoft's target today goes to 600 at D.A. Davidson. Amazon's target goes to 250 at Truist. Meta's target goes to 740 at Baird. NVIDIA's closing in on $4 trillion in market cap. Joe Terranova, you're answering the question first.
NVIDIA.
Over the next 6 months?
NVIDIA.
It's up 16% year to date. It trails Meta and Microsoft. My answer. I don't care what your answer is.
Okay, NVIDIA.
Okay.
Meta.
Why?
Because I think while they're all overvalued,
based
I think
on
this
what?
is the last.
Why are they all
based
overvalued?
upon the investments, based upon PE, trailing PE.
Well, I know you're talking about the PE, but I mean, what's the NVIDIA's overvalued?
Yeah, I think it's
Meta's overvalued.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Alphabet's overvalued.
I'm fine with that. Alphabet's not, but there's a fundamental issue with Alphabet, which is search, and that I think is going to keep a lid in the stock. But Meta is just making investment after investment in AI, and I think that's going to continue to pay dividends.
I know, but these companies are all buying NVIDIA's product.
Mm-hmm. They are, but Meta's also making their own chips. Amazon's making their own chips. Google's making their own chips eventually. And the idea of making their own chips is to dig into the dominant market share that NVIDIA has. So eventually that will start to hit NVIDIA, and they've already been producing chips that for their own uses. And maybe they'll produce enough to sell and compete with NVIDIA.
What's your answer?
My answer is Amazon, but I don't think either of these two stocks are overvalued. I think you can buy NVIDIA, I think you can buy Meta, and certainly you can buy Amazon down here. This one's relatively underperformed its peer group. You've got AWS, which is incredible. You've got Prime, you've got advertising. They're getting into robotics, satellite. It's just a very diversified company, certainly led by AWS at the moment.
Bryn, what would your answer be?
Oh, NVIDIA. NVIDIA's been basing out, that broke through that 145, 150. All roads lead to NVIDIA. Meta's spending money. They're all spending money. They may be buying chips, making their own chips, but NVIDIA is not making chips. They're making 70-pound to 1-ton tech stacks that people are using for data centers. And so I think this breakout you can get if the market continues to rally. NVIDIA, goes to 200. So I'll go with Joe with NVIDIA, $200 price target.
We'll watch the $4 trillion level on the market cap. Watching the banks, too.
Now let's move over to NVIDIA, because this is related to Microsoft as well. The information reporting, one of NVIDIA's top customers, Microsoft, is slowing down plans for its own artificial intelligence chip. That's some optimism there that for many years to come, and pretty much guarantees NVIDIA is going to have Microsoft as a top customer for some time now. And then finally, the new fiscal year for Microsoft, we should get some detail on capital expenditures for the next 12 months and how much would actually go to NVIDIA. Already said that it's going to grow from $80 billion in the fiscal year that ended a couple days ago, but at a slower rate than that year. And then finally, I know you said trifecta, but let's make it a quadfecta here, Scott, because Oracle is at new highs today after Bloomberg just reported OpenAI is planning to rent its data centers as part of that big Stargate project. That was expected, of course, but it's going to be a lot of revenue there for Oracle over the coming years, Scott.
All right, I'm glad you pointed that out. Steve, thanks. Steve Kovach. Joining us now at Post 9, Plexo Capital's Lo Toney. He's a CNBC contributor. Welcome back. It's good to have you.
Thanks, sir.
Seems like, in part because of what Steve was just talking about, that $4 trillion in market cap for that company is a formality with NVIDIA at this point.
It seems like that's the case at this point.
Is that how it feels like this is up and away? I mean, nothing can stop this
I
thing?
think we're going to start seeing more competition. You know, obviously, there's going to be other solutions that are available. We're starting to see that. I think there's going to be other options available for folks. But nonetheless, I think NVIDIA at this point, clear leader and setting the tone for things to come.
When you hear that other companies, you know, AWS, I mean, Amazon making their own chips and others too, to your point, it give you any pause at all over where NVIDIA is relative to everybody else, even if other competitors are coming?
It would if it were the case that we believe that the growth was stalling out for AI. In fact, it's actually increasing. So I think with that bigger pie, NVIDIA will still play an important role, albeit even with increased competition.
When you look at all of these companies, do you have any pause in your belief that they can continue to do what they've done, whether it's from a public equity standpoint, all of the spending that they've done, the return on the investment that they're getting today versus what they think they're going to get tomorrow? Are you as optimistic halfway through this year as you were at the beginning?
I mean, let's look at what happened towards the end of last year and the first half of this year, right? We saw a lot of headwinds that pulled down not only big tech stocks, but the market in general. But I think what we've seen now is this resilience around tech. It's largely led by AI, right? We see that they're probably going to have like almost up to $2 trillion in spending on AI. It's here. And that has both shown in the case of NVIDIA. I think it's also shown in the case of Apple. And the point was made earlier, Microsoft's layoffs. I want to talk about that.
Well, I was going to ask you about that next. So what do you want to say about it?
So what I would like to say is, even though nothing was said officially by the company in terms of the impact that AI had on those layoffs, I think that that could be a canary in the coal mine moment. And this is why I say that. The canary in the coal mine, I think, it portends what we're seeing with the advancements of AI, particularly around code generation. If we look back, Microsoft was a leader. Their acquisition of GitHub and the Copilot, they were able to really start and set the stage for auto generation. But that was more like predictive text, like when you're writing an email and it tries to figure out the next word in that email. We're in a completely different moment now. With companies like Cursor, the startup that's one of the fastest AI companies to $100 million, did it in a year. What they're doing is they're completely redefining what it means to use AI. This is like the equivalent of, instead of line by line and word by word, they can actually use the context of the emails that you've received, and then companies like Cursor can write the email for you. So when it comes to code generation, I think what we're seeing is the potential for not just a cyclical moment for Microsoft to identify efficiencies because they might be worried about what the market is going to be showing. I think we may be at the beginning of a complete structural reorganization of what it means to be a technology company producing software and integrating AI. I think no job is safe. It used to be, hey, go to college, learn how to code, get a great job, and you'll be safe. I don't know that we're there anymore. I think even when you look at people that have the jobs that are creating the AI, I don't even know if those jobs are safe anymore.
That's a scary proposition that you lay out, that the fears around AI, that maybe this is one of the first true moments of roles being either fully redefined or fully automated. And if a company that's right in the epicenter of artificial intelligence is telling you that and acting on it, gosh knows what is in store for everybody else.
That's right. Who else better knows, right? We see now that engineers on a daily basis, are up to 70% of them, are using AI as part of their daily workflow. Right? And so what we see is the ability for these new tasks where before we said, oh, well, AI is going to do some of the more rote work. right? And they can do higher level work. I think now what we're seeing is a complete restructuring where there's going to be a new need for a new skill set to kind of oversee the architecture for the development of these models. But I don't know if we're going to see the need for some of these lower level engineers that are doing some of the more basic tasks. Now, we haven't gotten to the point where AI is able to produce code that's free of all bugs, right? Like they say up to, potentially 40% of the code generated might be bugs or duplicative code. So that brings a little bit of debt to the process where code bases may need to be completely redone. But AI is going to help there too.
So I'm thinking of like 18 months ago, we sat down with Mustafa Suleyman out in San Francisco. He, of course, now the CEO of Microsoft AI. He writes a book called he was one of the co-founders of DeepMind.
DeepMind, yes.
He writes a book called The Coming Wave. You're telling me that the wave is here.
It feels like it. I think what we always know with certainty is these technological shifts always get here a little bit faster than we anticipated. Look at self-driving cars, Waymo. Well, that's so far away, and now look, you see Waymo's, the only thing holding back Waymo's is their ability to scale to all these cities.
I think the pushing out the chip designs, right? And so we know that, again, like all of NVIDIA's major customers, which are meaning to be their major competitors at some point, the fact that they are doing that just tells you that the capabilities internally are probably not the sort of thing that investors who've been buying like stocks like Broadcom, would think, right? So some of those TAMs that we heard from Broadcom late last year and reiterated by Marvell, earlier this year, maybe they're not there for them, right? Maybe it is the sort of thing that NVIDIA continues just to dominate. But at the end of the day, I think about NVIDIA and I think about the customer concentration and, Microsoft's their biggest customer. And, NVIDIA is going to be competing with them in data centers too. So it's becoming like a pretty... Eventually. I mean, but, it's all happening. So it seems like there's a little bit of a love triangle here. It all points to probably pretty decent news
I like that
for NVIDIA, though. But then you say to yourself, Kovac just said it. $4 trillion in market cap. Who thought NVIDIA would be that one, right? And so it's kind of all happening there. I'd go a different direction because I think all of the AI news and the names that we know are getting a little exuberant. I'd start to look at some of these chip manufacturers. Like I would look at, not TSM, but I'd say the suppliers of that would be an AMAT or something like that. Those guys are coming off the net chip equipment providers. So I think you got to kind of go further afield at this point because I think those names are kind of full up.
Doesn't this show you that it's much harder than you thought to compete in database chips? I mean, the bread and butter of NVIDIA, and that maybe NVIDIA's moat is actually pretty decent at this point, even though there are all these reports that Amazon and Microsoft and Google, they're all making their own chips.
Yeah, well, it sounds like Amazon is well on their way to making chips that they use, but it also speaks to the demand for processing power, right? And so, with NVIDIA being right in the center, the picks and shovels, we talk about it all the time, it doesn't seem like the demand part, which would be the real thing that would make the stock turn, is changing at all for the worse. In fact, I think it's getting better.
Yeah, I think it does bode well for the supply chain, the infrastructure. So I like TSM for this and their advanced packaging capacity. And they talked about how that's actually gotten stronger over the last couple of months. An ARM, I think some of these players are ones you want to hold here. And I do think that you could look at it from both sides and just say people are kind of slowing down on Microsoft. But I think Microsoft's got their hands full in a lot of places, in a lot of interesting places, and I think that's maybe just good news for everybody. I don't think this is a signal that there's less demand in terms of AI and in terms of chips and building up those reservoirs of capacity. But I do think this obviously does underscore NVIDIA's leadership. I think it's also proven that AMD has had a pretty good month, and there's a reason they've had a pretty good month because I think people have underestimated where the 350 and the 400 chips have been. They've given some announcements in the last month that have been bullish. I like AMD.
Was this good news or bad news for Microsoft ultimately, Bonawyn?
I think it's more neutral.
Okay.
Frankly, I would have been more concerned had they essentially conceded that they were having these design issues and continue to push forward, spending money that you're not going to get an ROI on. I think that's where you would have seen probably a decline double of what we saw today. Like the rest of the group, I definitely think it's a positive for NVIDIA. Essentially, the complexity around the design and manufacturing process. We're going to hear about Intel later. Like clearly, that is something that probably wasn't yet priced into the stock. I know a lot of us were looking out to 26 numbers and saying, okay, that's probably where the extent of the visibility. I think this probably buys you another 12 to 18 months in terms of understanding that revenue level will probably remain where it is.
We had talked earlier today about Microsoft scaling back their AI chip ambition. I want to know what you think of that. Who wins? Why'd they do it?
Yeah, so I don't cover Microsoft. However, the whole concept of large hyperscalers working on their own AI chips is very well known, and every single one of them is working on it to some degree. Some are farther along than others. I mean, this is Microsoft's sort of first effort, and I'm not necessarily surprised that it would take some time to get it right. I mean, to be honest, really the only large hyperscale that's shipping these things in very sizable volumes is Google, and they work with Broadcom, and I mean they've been working with Broadcom on this stuff for over 10 years. And they've kind of got it down now. Microsoft, was their first gen. The stuff's hard, and you have to remember NVIDIA themselves. What you're competing against with NVIDIA, it's a moving target. Like NVIDIA is not standing still, so you have to make sure that what you're developing today is actually be competitive with whatever NVIDIA has when those products come out. And because NVIDIA is moving so quickly, it makes it very difficult. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't have any intrinsic knowledge of what's going on over there, but it wouldn't surprise me.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. NVIDIA finished the day about 2.5% higher. We got two pieces of NVIDIA news today. First, Bloomberg is reporting that Oracle will provide OpenAI with even more capacity in the US in an expansion of the Stargate deal. This, of course, is very positive for NVIDIA, as NVIDIA will be providing a substantial amount of the hardware. And then the second piece of news today has to do with Microsoft, as was discussed in some of the clips you just watched. The information is reporting that Microsoft is scaling back development of its own in-house AI chips. At this point, I have no idea whether what the information reports is correct or not. The article they posted last Friday about OpenAI using TPUs was responded to by an OpenAI spokesperson saying they have no current plans to deploy Google's TPUs at scale. Sometimes the information reports correctly and sometimes they do not. But if this report about Microsoft scaling back their efforts to develop in-house chips is correct, then it is a major positive for NVIDIA. This is because Microsoft is one of NVIDIA's largest customers, and this essentially confirms that Microsoft will continue buying from NVIDIA for a long time. In recent weeks, there have been many people in the financial press giving bearish takes on NVIDIA because of incoming competition. We've repeatedly spoken about how NVIDIA's competitive moat is still very much intact. NVLink Fusion allows companies to integrate accelerators from other companies into NVIDIA systems. And most importantly, NVIDIA is no longer just a chip company. They're selling holistic AI systems as they innovate at every component of the system, not just the chip. You can only improve a GPU custom ASIC or TPU so much before you start to run into bottlenecks in other parts of the system. To work around this, NVIDIA innovates at every component of the system, including both hardware and software. This means that if another company develops a faster chip than NVIDIA's, it doesn't really concern NVIDIA because the chip is simply one component of the system. Additionally, NVIDIA's CUDA is a massive advantage for NVIDIA when it comes to maintaining their competitive moat. CUDA is widely recognized and the go-to for many, many developers. And if developers are building on CUDA, they're not going to want to switch to a different software platform. CUDA is a massive strength for NVIDIA when it comes to maintaining their moat, and it is not talked about enough. Wherever the developers go, those are the platforms that succeed. We've seen that be the case with Microsoft, Apple, and now with NVIDIA. Hearing so many talking heads in the financial press talk bearishly about competition coming for NVIDIA has felt similar to the DeepSeek trough, when we were saying repeatedly on this channel for months that DeepSeek was not a bad thing for NVIDIA and that it would actually increase demand for NVIDIA's products. We said this for months, even as many in the financial press continued with their ill-informed assumptions of the situation, incorrectly assuming that DeepSeek would be bad for NVIDIA. Of course, their assumptions turn out to be incorrect. It's felt very similar in recent weeks, talking about competition and NVIDIA's competitive moat. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert on this stuff, and I'm still learning. But I do understand that NVIDIA is clearly maintaining their competitive moat and even strengthening it, and they do not have to worry about competition anytime soon. At the same time, I do think there's plenty of room for other companies like AMD, Broadcom, and others to succeed because there is just so much demand. And so I'm definitely not hating on those companies. I think they and NVIDIA can all be successful in this market because the AI pie is so massive and NVIDIA simply cannot meet all of the demand. I continue to be bullish on the long-term future of NVIDIA. Be prepared in the coming weeks in case we get news of semiconductor tariffs. I mention this because it appears we may get a flurry of trade deal announcements shortly before the July 9th deadline. If that is the case, then the administration and Commerce Department will be much more likely to turn their attention toward the sector-specific tariffs that they promised months ago, including semiconductor tariffs. If NVIDIA stock trades lower on the announcement of semiconductor tariffs, I seriously think that would just be a short-term negative reaction that does not impact NVIDIA's long-term trajectory. NVIDIA has been working with many of their partners, including TSMC, Foxconn, Wistron, and others, to aggressively onshore manufacturing to the US. And so do not panic if NVIDIA trades lower on an announcement of semiconductor tariffs. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective. I seriously think this company is going to be worth substantially more in the years ahead than it is today. Blackwell production has ramped swiftly, representing 70% of NVIDIA's data center revenue in Q1. Blackwell Ultra should launch very soon, with shipments starting as soon as August or September. And Blackwell Ultra should ramp very quickly, as it is essentially just an upgrade of the chips within the Blackwell system. It is not an entire system upgrade like Blackwell was. After Blackwell has ramped, we should see margins return to the mid 70% range late this fiscal year, as NVIDIA forecasted. We have a clear data center product roadmap that stretches all the way into 2028. In 2026, we should start to see shipments of NVIDIA's next generation Vera Rubin. The Vera CPU will be NVIDIA's first ever custom CPU built to work in lockstep with the GPU. And the Rubin GPU will, of course, provide substantial improvements compared to Blackwell. NVIDIA maintains their competitive moat across the entire stack, both hardware and software. And NVIDIA's software offerings in CUDA is a massive advantage for NVIDIA, as it is widely recognized and the go-to choice for many developers. I think that NVLink Fusion actually strengthens NVIDIA's competitive moat, as it increases the likelihood that customers will remain within NVIDIA's ecosystem. NVIDIA is delivering performance upgrades that are so substantial that their customers have no choice but to continue purchasing NVIDIA's latest products in large quantities. NVIDIA is bringing AI to the world's enterprise IT, which Jensen believes is an opportunity worth hundreds of billions of dollars. NVIDIA has massive sovereign AI deals both in the Middle East and Europe, with 20 sovereign AI factories being planned in Europe, along with many other AI factories being planned by European companies. Jensen believes that Europe's computing capacity will 10x in just 2 years, and NVIDIA will play a crucial role in the future of quantum computing. Jensen told us at GTC Paris that NVIDIA is working with just about everyone in the quantum industry on NVIDIA's CUDA-Q platform, and that the next generation supercomputers will have a QPU assigned with QPUs connected to GPUs. Just as NVIDIA used their GPUs to speed up CPUs, they're now going to do the same thing with QPUs. Jensen thinks that the world's computing capex will reach $1 trillion annually by 2030. If he is correct, then NVIDIA should be worth substantially more in the years ahead than it is today. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.